All good? Excellent. Elected members, staff, members of the gallery, and folks online, apologies for taking a bit of time to get the live link up. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of Council for the month of August. In doing so, I'd like to acknowledge the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the land, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. Also read you the Council Pledge. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Please be seated. Thank you, everyone back in the room, and hopefully this will continue, but of course we are at the mercy of the orders regarding the restrictions, so we'll carry on as best we can, whenever we can. On leave tonight, we have Councillor Nguyen is still on leave. Apologies, there are nil. Declaration by members of a conflict of interest. Just declare that I have a perceived conflict regarding item 10.5, as I'm named in the report.
It's similar, maybe absolutely the same as you.
Councillor Barnett, the same item 10.5.
Yes, I could see when I mentioned the report that I will stay and discuss and vote.
Yes, equally I will stay, discuss and vote because it affects all of us. And Councillor Harris, the same note for yourself.
Yeah, I don't think it's a conflict, but
You're going to note a perceived conflict, but you'll stay and discuss and vote as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other conflicts of interest to declare? Councillor Group.
Just on that basis, I'm not named in the same report, but I have done 10 years or 11 years of that. So does that raise a perceived conflict? It does, I'll declare it, but I will stay for the debate.
I don't know if I can answer those questions that are only in your mind, but if you wish to register a perceived
I wish
conflict,
to register a perceived conflict.
offer item 10.5. Okay, thank you. Any other conflicts of interest? Mandatory governance, you've got all those? All good. Thank you. Item 5, confirmation of the minutes for both the ordinary council meeting on the 27th of July and the minutes of the special council meeting as per what's on the screen for the 10th of August. Sorry, that wasn't in the agenda papers. Mr. Barnett, happy to move it. Do you wish to speak to it?
No.
Do I have a seconder? Deputy Lord Mayor, wish to speak to it?
No.
Further debate?
I was going to third.
All those in favour? It's carried. Sorry, Councillor DeBacker, you're my extreme right. No, that's okay, as long as I remember to see you. Just gotta, so, just, if at first you're waving, I don't see you, just, I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Speak up. Speak up. Apologies in advance if I missed you. Public question time. There have been nil registered. Is there anyone in the gallery who wishes to raise a question in public question time? I don't think there's anyone in the gallery, is there, apart from staff? And well, you could if you wanted to, Daniel, but no. No. Excellent. We'll pass on that one. Petitions, we have nil. Deputations, nil. Questions without notice. Are there any? There being none, we'll go past that to reports for decision. We have a number, item 10.1, Bendi Kamunka. Within the list of recommendations here is a requirement for a recommendation for a nomination. So it might be helpful to suspend meeting procedures to seek that nomination, should there be any, and that will enable further discussion because there's quite a bit in this report. So seek leave to suspend meeting procedures until 7:30 should be needed. All those in favour? Against is carried, thus suspended. So first of all, we'll take questions on the report, and just to preface by saying I noticed you see I'm named in here as being part of the initial meetings. They've been, I think, quite good, but they are just initial meetings to try and get some foundation. We've had a bit of correspondence. I've asked staff to chase up where that's at, and on the way, let us know where the RAP actions are at. Because I understand from Councillor Harris there hasn't been a meeting for some time. I've had that confirmed. There hasn't been a formal meeting for quite a long time. So I was concerned that there's a few things that just weren't happening. So I've encouraged CEO to get a report. I'm grateful to her and the director for bringing this to us. So you see a whole pile of things bundled into one report. So that's a bit of background. Christine.
Yes, the only thing I would like to bring to your attention and discuss is the proposed steering committee gender representation. That there's this possibility that all of the council reps are male. And yet I think it was one of the Ghana people in part 5 recommendation was it's, they were looking for reps to be exclusive on men and women. They each appear to have a man and a woman representing each one of those. So I do think actions speak louder than words. So I'm looking to see if we can address that.
Thank you. In fact, there's a comment that other people can comment on. Are there any other questions?
Well,
Alan?
to half follow on for that, but the first bit I was going to say, and you did mention it, David, yourself, that I was a bit disappointed sometimes that it's been going for this thing and then we didn't have where we are now, or that sort of at least meetings that it involved us into this stage. Glad we're doing it now because I don't really want to put it down because the whole thing's pretty good. But I do want to take on board what Christina said, because to be honest, I'd like to be nominated for that position. But then it will it will exclude the way what Christina raises. Now I support what Christina said. The only alternative is possible 2 people or something down that line that we haven't got here. The other one is when there's 2 residents that we're going to be asking for, and just to help some people in their mind. 2 people that I was going to nominate. One is the Ghana Heritage, and the other one was Helen. That was at one of the meetings we had. So they're both women that I'm going to nominate, but it doesn't sort of fix Christina things, so I don't know. And to be quite honest, I don't want to. If someone nominates me, I don't want to sort of step back from that because I'd like to be on it. But it's important what Christina raised, and I agree with what she raised, that the gender things there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments about the rest of the report? No, you happy with that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what our answer is, but I'll wait and see.
Oh yeah, yep. Matt.
I'm happy with the report. And so my question is again with regards to the composition of the group. I can't quite say that it time bounds any appointments here, and I suspect this is a group which might work over a longish period of time. So I'm not sure when the right time is to discuss the tenure, so to speak, of the committee.
I think if the elected member reps will be spilled at the November election next year, so that's easy. But the rest of the steering group won't have that trigger. I would expect that the representatives of the Ghana people will be chosen by them. So therefore, it's the local resident reps, and whether we put a tenure on those people seems sensible. Staff want to comment on that? Yeah.
I've got to essentially agree with the comments listening to the members. As for the interested residents, at this point in time, our view was possibly treat them in a similar way to the kayak representatives, which is to get them on board at this point and continue suggestion around that. I think might be one of those public. We don't know where that impact will be. Is it 18 months? Being an artificial deadline.
Matt, do you have anything in mind?
Well, I think it's about sharing the knowledge that is generated out of being part of this group and spreading it more broadly than just with a select group of people. I think is good practice. We've got examples of where we do that in other committees that we form. And in business as well, you would rotate members on a board or a committee to give different people opportunities to be involved. And that's the only reason that I raised it as a suggestion. I've no doubt that the people who are elected onto it could do a good job, but if we want to really do as much as we can to permeate
what gets discussed through a broader group of people, then having a turnover is a good idea.
So just getting a bit technical, item 5 talks about the membership to include elected members, and that's required because we have to choose who goes on from us. It doesn't actually lock in any other aspect of the shape and size, I don't think, does it? Let's see, I'll put that wrong.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't.
No, and the first meeting of the committee can shape its own terms of reference, so we can talk about the independent members of the community and whether they potentially stay there until June 2023, which allows the new council then to put its own community representatives on that steering committee at that time. It gives the new council time to get its feet under the table and decide what it wants to do with the steering committee.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it might be good to flip that to them to sort out,
Yes.
because if you wanted to amend something to say a maximum tenure of whatever, there's actually nowhere to attach it.
I think in terms of reference, once the committee's established, we'll cover a cover a number of things which should be considered when forming this group.
Correct. Meeting frequency, who attends, how many's a quorum, all those things need careful attention. The quorum, for instance, we want to make sure that there's enough of the kayak representatives there. And if everyone else turns up but they're not there, you'd say, is that important? You want the numbers, but not the, so the whole heap of things I need to think. Any other comments, questions?
So this process at this point, in terms of whether it's called treaty, however it works, so that doesn't lock us into that at this stage. This is just part of forming the group, and then they'll determine whether they go down, which path they go down. That's sort of my read on these recommendations. It doesn't.
My expectation is that we're going down multiple paths.
Correct. Looking at more looking at.
The way it's been expressed to me at our preliminary meetings is there's a desire to have voice. Steering group is partially the way there. I would expect in time the steering group might say we'd prefer to be a section 41 committee, so their recommendations will formally come to council and you make formal decisions, because that gives weight to the element of voice out of the treaty, out of the statement from the heart. We've already said we want to have a Makarata process and a treaty or other agreement process. So that means there's 3 things already. Then you put in the RAP agenda. There's a whole pile of moving parts within that. So I would have thought the steering group would deal with a whole pile of matters. And they may actually come back to us saying this agenda's too big. You need to have more than one body looking after this, or a subcommittee of the steering group. I don't have the answer to that. But it certainly won't be one dimensional. And Alison?
The process has been interesting to date, because I think one time Nigel presented on policy and I presented on or again, I think I expressed my disappointment. People having conversations with, and there's obviously a reason for that. And I think having a steering committee is a great thing. But one thing I did pick up from the report is that it is a verbal process, and they're talking about verbal communication as a big part of cultural ways, that everything we're doing is in report format. And I just find that even in the way we bring things to council like this, can other better ways. And I think we need to bring our community along. And I think there has to be an easier way for our community to get involved in this process, because our community might move faster than the council will. And I think projects like I think it was the dancing circle that was up at Adelaide, the Memorial Gardens, or the Memorial Gardens, we're getting presented with tennis courts, but I'm not seeing those kind of things. We've already kind of put those kind of things forward. So I think there's just a bit of a disconnect with what's happening clinically, and I know we have to have all these things for a community to exist, and I think it's really, really important. But I think certainly I feel quite disconnected from the process, and where it's an opportunity for me as an elected member to learn how can I, in my role as an elected member, assist. So if there's better ways to communicate back to community and elected members, I'd like to know. And also just a question through the chair, just regarding the magazine promotion. Did we get any responses for people wanting to get involved?
I believe so. Staff. Yeah.
We've had 3 so far.
Yep, I've had personal approaches as well, and I think Alan has. So there's reasonable interest in being involved, and not just kind of I want to listen. People are happy to donate substantial amounts of their effort to be involved.
So, I mean, same thing as even if as an elected member, I might not necessarily be involved with the normal committee, but I'd like to be involved more because it's my own learning as well. I don't like feeling ignorant of this and I want to know more.
Yep.
And I think, it'd be better to bring everyone along on that journey where possible.
Yep, I totally agree. Just in response, the kayak themselves have asked for more structure around it. So they're happy that it's moving towards a steering committee process, and at the same time, I think they'll ask for more formality. Others around interpreting statement from the heart saying more formality is absolutely necessary because these things just aren't being progressed enough, and people want to feel like they're influencing outcomes. So there's a bit of a response to one thing you raised. They're actually asking for more formality, despite also declaring that their language is a verbal language. And therefore it's often difficult for them to write it down or for the people to suggest a particular written expression of what they're thinking. In terms of the process about engaging us, so can I just turn it into a question into staff? There are a number of things in the RAP that are noted to seek our engagement. Like, engaging with elected members to deepen our understanding of our Ghana traditions. There's been a whole heap of time on that since that was written and endorsed by council. Could you just help us understand why so many of those things aren't yet done? Because that would have, I think, been answered to Alison's question. So you could help us with that.
RAP was structured in such a way that it assigned responsibilities across the organisation in an effort to embed it more broadly into the community portfolio. There were some challenges getting resources in other areas, to be frank, to deliver on some of those recommendations. And then there was some time lag after that staff member left. Back on so it's essentially a resource challenge. Tasks that's happening. The office, looking at the rest of the
Is that the same staff member as the dance circle location and a few of those other matters that don't seem to have moved?
Circulation began, so no, the dance circle is an infrastructure project that the community was helping with. Get the engagement happening. That process is slowed, essentially due to funds moving on to detailed design.
We haven't even asked about alternate locations. So just what's the internal governance structure? I mean, it might be a bit operational, but who's managing the RAP response internally? Is it just the CEO that we point to, or what's your?
I think it's a shared responsibility between the CEO and obviously the Director of Community and Planning. But I think going forward, what we have suggested is that a quarterly report will come back to council, which identifies traction to some of those RAP actions, because I think that that's really important because it has been a lost issue in the organisation from my perspective. So I think, the accountabilities certainly need to be structured better than what they have been in the past. And I think a quarterly report back to council to report on how that traction is moving forward, particularly those actions embedded within the RAP, I think would be a good accountability to have going forward. And it's certainly what I anticipated occurring under Resolution 6 in your report tonight. And in fact, we had talked earlier about, rather than having the word regular updates, having quarterly updates so that they are actually coming to council, so you can see that visibility. Because certainly as part of any induction process, when the new term of council starts, there should certainly be a cultural training and awareness session or sessions held during that time. But I think that there's some catch-up things that need to be done between now and the November 2022 elections.
So you're recommending that change in item 6, that regulars replace the word quarterly?
Yes, definitely.
People okay with that?
Yeah.
Is that on the screen already for us to look at as a staff recommended change, or is that what you're intending? It's not in there at the moment. Item 6.
Change the word regular to quarterly.
Let staff sort that out and And Matt, sorry, you had your hand up.
Just to Alison's point, there's more worthy elected members around the table to be on this committee than myself. That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in the process, as are we all. And I wonder how, when's the right time for us to come together with this group and with the broader group here and get a sense of how it's going to unfold, so that we can, when the reports come back to us, we can see how it's going. Because what might happen is that the reports will start coming in quarterly, and we kind of don't get the context about the discussions that were had in order to set the agenda and talk about the things that the group is intending to achieve. So I don't know how we do this, but it would be, great to have a get together of some description in an informal location and get this group and then this group together and just talk about it. And so we can all just understand how it's going to unfold in that informal setting. And then that would really help me understand what they're looking to achieve and then make sense of the reports. So I don't know how we move that forward, or how we make that an action to be considered.
It could be a workshop item, could it?
I'll look at and I think certainly, the Mayor talked about layers and the breadth at the moment of the terms of reference of this group, and I think you'll find there'll be a number of different tangents on which the governance around that will be will play out over time. And certainly a lot of the RAP actions are actions for the administration to actually embody into this process. So I think that there are cultural learnings, there are learnings on a broader scale that we need to go through. So I think there's going to be a number of different approaches, and I think that'll get fleshed out as this group meets, and certainly over the first couple of meetings. And I would say that there will be a number of different opportunities for the groups to come together in both informal and social settings, so that there is that learned and shared environment and experience together.
As long as it's early enough, so we can. Yeah. In my feeling, as long as we can be part not of the very first meetings, but some of the formative discussions, as opposed to it coming to us when it's kind of done. Yeah. That's not really going to help me engage as much and feel ownership of it. So not that I'll contribute that much, but quite right.
And there's just a lot of it. So I think staff want to take that as a concept rather than a commitment. There's some excellent spokespeople now on process around this. There's been some really good stuff done by Reconciliation SA in terms of webinars. The National Mob's doing it as well. And they've gone specifically to people who are experts in constitutional law, experts in researching treaties, experts in talking about what Makarrata means and interpreting state from the heart, people who are there. So there's any number of people we could get in here to say, and I think that's the discourse we want to have with the broader community as well. So it's not just us. There's so much we could do, and I have to say I've expressed my disappointment behind the scenes that this has not moved anywhere near as fast as it should. And it's not even moving as fast as a glacier. But there's so much opportunity to talk about this. We're nowhere near making a decision because we just don't understand it. And it's got to start. I was brutally honest. I say that motion was moved in September last year. We don't have our first community gathering until October. It's over a year since Councillor Harrison and Councillor Barnett seconded it, brought the initiative to this council. I don't know how to explain that to our community. I just want to get on with it. So, hence the report before us. Can I have a bit of feedback about the gender issue raised by Councillor Barnett in terms of whether we have one or two nominees, or whether people are do something about that?
I was going to ask, though, sorry, the way I read on this, the way the recommendation for written is that it's just asking only for one councillor. Is there the ability to actually have more than one councillor on it? Because the way I read it, it's only calling for one.
Sorry, before I get answer that, we've got to 7:30 pretty much. Can I seek leave to extend the meeting, extend the suspension of meeting procedures until 7:45 should we need it? All those in favour? Against this carried. Staff, recommendation for one councillor plus the mayor. Could we have some insight into that?
So before I throw to Nathan, so what we're trying to do is get the balance of kayak representatives to non-kayak representatives so that it continues to be action speaking like words. So it's a shared experience, it's a balanced experience. So that's why it was one councillor, not more. But something that we had thought about is whether there is a nominated councillor and maybe a proxy member councillor, so that if that councillor can't attend, at least we've got someone else that we can call on, so that we've always got that elected representatives number there. In terms of the gender issue, I might throw to Nathan, but my understanding is that from the kayak side, they certainly do like to see both male and female in decision making. I'm not sure whether that's reflected in their request of us or not. Obviously, gender equality is something that is broader than this subject. It's a much broader subject, and it's something that I think everybody aspires to. But obviously, that's a decision of council. So I'm not sure whether Nathan wants to add anything further.
Essentially, nothing to that. Other than to reinforce the kayak representatives have made the point that they like to have male and female in the room for most decisions. And with the 3 representative slots that we've got available, I absolutely imagine that they will have forward, and 2 out of the 3 community members put their hands up to female. The talk internally was, we know that there are 5, 6, 7, or 8, or 9 councillors that want to really participate in this. So we get what we were trying to do, as Alison was saying, is to get the balance right. Otherwise, it becomes a council process where we're getting a couple of representatives from the Darwin community to buy into it, rather than share experience. So the effort to not emphasise it. There will be feedback loops, there will be opportunities. I think this is just about
Okay, so comments on that? Sorry, Alison first.
Yeah, so just a question, I guess, in regards to when you have a committee, there is the ability to have a gallery. Would it be appropriate in this instance? And that may be a way that other elected members can.
I wouldn't have any problem with it. The more transparent, the better.
Yeah.
It's complicated, this stuff.
Yeah.
we just this being
Yeah.
I was going to ask the same question.
I mean, I'd be at ease if I knew that it was something that was really interesting or I wanted to learn. I could actually learn a gallery and be part of that process. So I'd be happy with it.
Yeah, thank you. Christine?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that I'm always having to remind us about the quality of gender issues. It's not just this time, it's other times as well. And I do get rather tired of it. I think actions speak louder than words. And I don't think we're measuring up the actions of what we should be aspiring to. I query why we have the chief executive officer, the mayor, a councillor, and one senior council officer. What's going to be the role of senior council officer?
Staff? Sorry.
So the intention of that was either the director or the manager who is responsible and has carriage of the implementation of the RAP and the Makarata and the steering group. So that was it. That can be done by an administrative officer if you wanted to replace that senior officer with another elected member. We would always have to have someone in there taking notes. But certainly the person who internally for us was the subject matter expert was intended to be that senior council officer.
And so they will be voting. There
may not be voting.
No.
I think it's fair to say we don't know that structure yet, but we need to put forward a decision-making framework to the group for them to work out. Part of that discussion needs to be whether or not the kayak representatives feel that they can vote on things, or whether we can just get a general collective position to go away and consult further. And I don't have the answer to whether or not the people that are sitting in the room are happy to be moving, seconding, and voting on it. So that's the discussion as part of setting the term.
Chris? Your point's well made. I guess the difficulty we've got is that there's only 2 out of the 8 elected members here tonight who are females. So you're quite right. We are not demonstrating equality, and as much as I agree with you. That's what the community's elected, and we need to all do a better job in the next election somehow. And so we have a fundamental problem already. The issue you're worried about, I understand this, is the next CEO is a bloke, and if the officer is chosen who is a bloke, well, there's, it's further out of balance. I'm not denying the issue. I understand. The issue about whether the officer needs to be on the committee or whether there's someone taking records, for me, is an internal governance issue. And again, it's more for the CEO. But I'm not surprised to see that you want someone there who's accountable for council's side of what needs to happen.
Well, sure, that's the chief executive officer.
Could make it as simple as that.
I'm in your hands. I think through the chair, regardless of whether they're an actual member of this group, they'll probably still be in the room because they are the ones that are going to be expected to take carriage of any action that's coming out of that room. So whether they're a named member or they're sitting in the room, they'll be there.
Steve.
Will it actually cause, just wanted to get my understanding, so I'm actually glad you suspended meeting procedures for this item. Would it cause, I guess, issues if we do add a second councillor and seek gender balance? You're saying potentially that they could throw the weight towards, I guess, the council reps, is that right? Or do you think the other members of the group would have an issue if we have one extra person?
Look, I think my view, I'm taking a really big step back and looking at this from a helicopter view.
Yeah.
We're trying to have a balanced committee of voice, of shared experience and shared voice. So if we were of the mind to put a second councillor, I would like to go back to Kayak and ask them to put a fourth member.
That's fair, yeah.
So I think that, they've certainly asked for 3 members. We haven't contemplated with them a fourth member, but I think in the true spirit of what this group is trying to achieve, I think that would be the respectable thing to do, is give them the opportunity to have further members in the room as well.
I think that makes total sense.
Yep. Someone's hand, go on. To get your glasses. So I'm just trying to look in every direction.
I don't mind I kind of like the position that Councillor Backer's taken on this, and also don't mind what Councillor Barnett's put forward as well. So, yeah, I didn't add anything there at all. Sorry.
Correct.
I retract my statement.
Where are we at, people? It's in our hands. We're shaping this thing, and these are the first steps. I expect there'll be another step in terms of formality. Don't know when, but perhaps after the next election, maybe just before. But we need to get this thing moving. At the moment, it's just me and the CEO in our Kayak discussions and no community reps. So this is just trying to get this formalised and started. I certainly appreciate at least one other elected member there with me. Well, first of all, how many positions are we talking about? There's been some discussion around there being more than one.
If you want, whether we have to move it as a member or not, I'm actually going to, or hopefully we don't have to, but if we do, I understand reasons why, because it's been publicly advertised. I would like to move that we actually, I'll describe it, I would like a second person and give gender balance, but and give the other group that opportunity to have a fourth member as well.
Okay, so 2 councillors as well as the mayor.
Two councillors along with the mayor and seeking that gender balance.
That doesn't necessarily guarantee a gender balance.
No,
And also makes an 11-person committee, which is very big.
So you'll think that structure as proposed is correct?
Well, I'm comfortable with the structure that's proposed. I take Councillor Barnett's point about gender balance. I think there is gender balance in the group. So that's my primary concern, is the gender balance across the group. Well, there is tick. Is there gender balance around the elected members? Well, we don't know, because we don't know who's putting their hand up and who might be voted in or not voted in. So we don't know that yet, and that's the decision we make as an elected group. I'm comfortable with the 9 and the 1 elected member. Thank Councillor De Backer for her commentary about us coming along. I think it's a great idea. I'd certainly come along to hear what's going on. I'm very interested in this. I think this is a really important piece of work. Must be to share it in that way. So I'm comfortable with how it is. I have no problem.
Alison?
I'm actually opposite. I'd probably rather have, I'd say, elected member with mayor and councillor. So one less elected member and maybe not maybe not the senior council officer, and have that small meetings group. And I don't know how that functions, it need to be.
Oh, it's just.
So just say, okay, so for example.
If you have some apologies to start.
Yeah, so just say with proxies, because the thing is, again, you don't want to get it too dominant and top heavy with council. And this is the whole issue, is having voice, and having a smaller group with a larger voice for people that we need to listen to, it just makes sense to me. So it's not about us, this is not about us, it's about listening and steering. You know, we can help facilitate it, bring our community along, but it's not about us. So I get a bit uncomfortable with some of the discussions around here, because I think it's too much about us. We've got the opportunity to listen, but I'd actually prefer a small group.
Okay. So, anyone else want to talk about there being an extra elected member rep on you? That's the case, in my simple role left is to seek a nomination for the one space that's here. I think Councillor Harris, you've already indicated.
I was going to nominate Councillor Harris.
Okay.
Unless
So
he wants to nominate himself.
No, I'm happy to.
accept the nomination. Do you have any other nominations?
And I think
I'm very uncomfortable because I'm
I think it's totally unfair for people to do that.
I'll take that as a comment. Are there any other nominations? And I appreciate almost everybody around this table is not just interested, but passionately interested in this topic. I get that, and I'm really proud to be the mayor of a council that is like that. But I think Alison's spoken really well. The bigger we make this, and the more it looks like us, I don't think we'll advance very far. Everything will have to come back through us already, and I think that's already a problem.
Well, that's where we need to be as educated as possible for that exact reason.
Yeah, but we are the decision-making body. This is the steering group.
Well,
So-
I think the one senior council officer be on the steering committee group, that is a support reference person or taking the notes. I think you've already got the chief executive officer there, you've got the two sort of leaders of council, mayor and CEO, which makes it very gives it that carriage. But again, I agree with Councillor Backer. I don't think it's going to be council on as a start with it.
Can I just have some views around that? If there's consensus, then we can, I think, and ask the staff to change it. But if there's not consensus, then that might need to be an amendment that we debate. Anyone else got a view on that issue?
I guess the question, it's difficult to ask this question because we have an interim CEO, we have a new CEO starting in a few months' time. And given that CEOs are very busy people, we're just got to make sure that whichever CEO is involved has got the time to dedicate and commit to this. Whether it's better that that's delegated down to a senior person and the CEO is not part of it. That's my only concern, not capability at all, just capacity to put the time into something as critical as this, particularly in the first instance when we're getting it up and running. So if the CEO, well, we don't know because we've got current and we've got future. If we felt the CEO's position afforded enough time to spend to this, then I'd be happy to suggest or support pulling out the senior council officer. But if not, then maybe it's the other way around.
So, yeah.
I think this group is of such importance to our community. It requires the CEO to make the time to be present and to be an active participant in this group. So I think it's incumbent on the CEO to make time to be there because it is of such importance. So I think I'm happy if the recommendation is changed to just the chief executive and take everything out, because at the end of the day, the elected body holds the chief executive accountable. How that then gets scaled across the organisation will need to be up to the CEO. But at the end of the day, I would imagine in practical sense, that person who's going to have that implementation responsibility will want to be in the room anyway to get the context. But will they be sitting around the hub of the table? They don't necessarily need to be.
Kathy, Mark?
My view would be to maintain that role in there. I just think from a capacity issue, absolutely, the CEO is going to need to have that person there next to them doing that work. I think if there is a view to take it out, my preference would be it goes to amendment so we can vote on it, because I wouldn't support it in this informal conversation.
Okay. Well, we're at 7:45, so that's what I was determining. Of course, back in the formal session, we've got one nomination. I did detect in the other nominations, unless there are any. So we'll put Councillor Harris in at item 5. The rest of the structure will stay, other than changing the word regular to quarterly on the CEO's advice in that part 6. Is somebody happy to move that way and get it on the floor and see if there are some amendments? Councillor Groot, do you wish to speak to?
Look, we've obviously been talking about this for a little while now, but this is a really important piece of work for us as a council. And I just want to reiterate, I thought probably some of the wisest words tonight, which is this is not about us as a group of councillors. This is about a community movement that we want to make, a very strong commitment that we made a long time ago. And it's consistent with some other things that we have done, the naming of this building, the name of streets, the co-naming of facilities around the city of Prospect. So this is all part of that conversation. I thank Councillor Harris for his interest and involvement in this, and also acknowledge Councillor Barnett hers as well. And I'll certainly be one of those sitting around in the gallery listening, because I think this is an important thing that we all listen to and we will understand. So I certainly commend the motion.
Thank you. Got a second? Councillor Harris, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thanks. A couple of points, particularly because we've been talking about it. I'm more than happy to second the whole motion as it is, with my name in it. Today, as we move this motion, I think if we remember today in 1996, Vincent Lingani let 27 people off Wave Hill in a pay dispute. And by the time that dispute, it was the second longest industrial dispute that we've had in this country after Broken Hill. It was 2.5 years. But as that went along, they found other reasons. It was the reasons of taking back their country. So one of the councillors spoke earlier about we've got a whole lot of things, and so did the mayor, a whole lot of things in here. This to me is a venture, a track we're taking that might not even end up anything like we've started. It could end up entirely different. And that's why I so strongly recommend it as it is, because we're taking this trail. And over the 12 months or 18 months that we've been trying to do it, and I sometimes think I'm smart and I know what I'm doing and that, but my views have changed in this as I've gone along. I always seen the Indigenous people as people that crossed our land and went past, but they were the residents of Prospect for 40 or 60 odd thousand years. So they weren't foreigners going through our land, they were here. And I think some of the people that might give an objection, well, we don't talk about the Italians or the Greeks that are here in this way, but they came here like I did, like my family from Ireland, your family from Ireland, other ones from various, Rachel Sanderson's come from England, and those sort of things that we talk about. These people didn't come from somewhere else. They were Prospect people before. So I'm endorsing the whole lot. I find I support particularly what councillors raised about I can only ever give a voice of a male. But anyway, unless I change, that's about what my voice is going to be. But I think it's very important to have the other half that holds up the sky to be part of this conversation as well. So I'm endorsing it. Those couple of people that I said I'm going to try and nominate to be the residents are both women, local women, and strong women as far as I see that can help us. So please endorse this. And not that often, but I read all of it from beginning to end, and went back and picked up a few sort of things as we went through. But please, hopefully we can move a bit quicker, a bit faster. But the last thing I want to just finish with, when we talk about what we want and look at, I speak, I hate to use the word, I speak English. I'd rather say I speak Australian, but I speak English. We as a group, not the individuals here, but as a group, we took the language away from these people. It was the first thing we done to try and get rid of them. We took their language away. So they got two battles, one to try and sort out something with us and one to understand their own language. That must be hard. We all sat here and not be able to say anything. You've got to draw back. So please endorse it. And with the CEOs, with the staff, with ourselves, I know we're going to come somewhere good.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I'm just endorsed, Councillor Harris has said, and I'm just pleased that we're finally, as the mayor has outlined, finally getting on and actually doing it. So, I've been taking up the point by Councillor De Backer and Councillor Lau, others, you know, that the more we can have it as an open sessions and have anybody else who is interested to be in a gallery. I think as soon as you start closing off as a little steering group and all meets and does its little thing and that, it just seems to start dissipating perhaps some of the energy, perhaps the understanding. It's all about a journey of understanding. So I think the more we keep those things in our mind, about diversity, including gender, including culture, we have to still keep putting those things in our minds. Always.
Thank you. Also, any further debate? Back to Councillor Group, wish to sum up. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. And CEO, you make a note, because it's not a Section 41 committee, having the meetings open will require an extra discipline around that. Because I note, as Councillor Barnett was speaking, that the Prospect Art Action Network and the Prospect Public Art Advisory Body don't advertise as open meetings, and they're both steering groups.
Yep.
It's kind of a disadvantage of informality, is it doesn't have those other thresholds. So see if we can get that as good practice. Yeah, but because they don't get advertised like a formal committee meeting and council meeting. So, 10.2 grant application submission court renewal plan Prospect Tennis Club. So I read that out badly, but it's got a few grammatical devices within it. I'm not quite sure how to say that properly. Someone wish to move it in its current form. Councillor Group, in a roll to speak to it.
A roll up tennis ball, yeah. I'll move this again on $50,000 that we're putting in. In our business plan that appears online, it actually has the amount of $425,000. I'm just trying to work out whether there's some accounting sleight of hand that means that those numbers are different.
It's a very good question. So yeah,
I might throw through to the Director of Infrastructure to give that update.
Director.
Through the mayor. So what's occurred there is we've originally notified the club of 450 before the business plan was finalised. In the final version of the business plan, in the detail, the Prospect Tennis Club is called out 450. We ended up $25,000 oversubscribed, which went to the Prospect Credit K Club bowler upgrade. So there is actually a $25,000 club, sorry. $25,000 shortfall in the overall building budget, even though the Prospect Tennis Club is called out in detail for 50. So it will be part of a future discussion of whether that's going to be an issue or not. I suspect that the first budget review will review the tour program and this program. Certainly, this is not enough. We can go through that detail.
Thank you. So I wish I hadn't called it out now. I wish I hadn't moved it because I'm uncomfortable moving this because we're effectively moving a budget that's $25,000 in deficit. So if anyone was to call an amendment for $425,000, I would certainly support it. So that's a little disappointing. And apologies if others were aware of that before tonight. It wasn't on my radar. Second comment I had is in the report, it actually says that the courts will meet current Tennis Australia standards. And I thought from our conversation with the club last week that it didn't quite meet the standard. It was half a metre short, I think, in the runoff. I just want to clarify, have the plans changed so it does meet Tennis Australia standard or has it not?
See ya.
My understanding through the chair, the recollection of the discussion last night, there's 3 different classification structures, and I thought that they said that these courts, proposed courts, do meet Tennis Australia's specification, but they don't meet the ATP Tour specification. So for the international standard, they don't meet those.
Okay. Thank you, if that's correct, thank you. I'm very still disappointed we're 9/10 the way there for this. We kind of encouraged the club and staff to think about that extra, 1/10. How do we get to the point where this is a bit more complete? Hopefully there's an opportunity for us to massage it a little bit later on if we need to get to that point. I think it's a missed opportunity because we're not going to have $500,000 into this budget line again anytime in the near future. So it would be good to understand that. My third comment was around the fact that we have 3 tennis clubs in the city of Prospect, and all 3 in the last probably 3 months have come and spoken to us about demands in their space. And this is clearly a business plan initiative, it's in the business plan, it's in the budget, it was advertised, so forth. But it feels like some might argue they've won the lottery as opposed to the other 2. So, it's like that.
No.
But I feel it'd be really good to have some consolidated views from the tennis clubs around how they can work together around facilities. I know it's not easy when they're in geographically different positions. There's 2 close to each other in this one, but I think this is great. It's great for the club. It's great for the tennis courts. I'm hoping it'll be great for the public who can access some of that facility at some time. We heard that they can do that. I am concerned about the budget nuance. And as I said, I probably wouldn't have moved it had I known that. We probably just need to do a little better at that budget stuff, I think. Apart from that, I'll gladly listen to what other people have to say.
Thank you. Got a seconder. Deputy Mayor, do you speak to it?
Briefly, sometimes backing grant applications like this does feel like a bit of a lottery, and we're not sure whether we're backing the right opportunity here. But I think that the chances of us winning are fairly high, and I think that the club has done a really good job of putting together a proposal. It did come to us pretty late. It would have been far better from my perspective to have been across this 3 months ago. So we could have contributed the thinking that we did last week, but it was too late to do anything with it. I think the staff have picked up on that point and have plans in place to speak to sporting organisations and community groups and help them understand how to work through this sort of process. It's a pretty significant organisation in the city of Prospect. They've done a lot of hard work. I think they'll value what we, if we are lucky enough to win the lottery, so to speak. They will value the opportunity they've been given and look after it really well, and it will make that whole precinct, I think it'll give it an uplift and continue some of the work that we've been doing around that area, and they're doing some of the work now without money, albeit. But yeah, it'll certainly add to the whole precinct, and so I'm supportive of this motion as well.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I'm going to support it, but I did have a couple of things. I've been down and had a look, and in the drawings that were shown and set up, we as a council area, we include some of the greenery on the Wilcox side down the road. I'm not sure how far it went out, but there's part of the lawn then that's going to become part of it. But I was more concerned when I went down to the RSL end of the court, and the discussion they had that was pointed out to us that they would, I believe was pointed out to us, is what my ears heard, they were going to move down to where the flagpoles were, the pine trees would come out, and pencil pine things come out, and then the fence of the tennis club would go there with some form of shade cloth covering in between. Well, if you have a look, as I did this morning, the flagpoles are right on, if not a little bit further away, of all those memorials along there. So if it goes to exactly what was said to us, the flagpole, it means the memorials are going to be touching the fence. You know, it's all going to be smack in there together, which I don't think is a very good thing. And when I suggested, or we suggested, that perhaps shift a whole lot away, I think David, you pointed out that possibly that could be $10,000 to start shifting sort of memorials and that. But I do have that concern, if that was what they said, well, it was what they said, but if it was correct, that it will go to the flagpoles. The flagpoles are there, the fence is currently there, and big memorial, and one other one is actually a bit more, couple of inches this side, so I'm a bit concerned with that. The other end is where there was a possibility, they spoke to us about, of having an open court occasionally, or with someone looking after them, that I think Court 8, I think they were looking at, and that sort of stuff. So I was hoping that we could have seen a little bit better there to make that available. The change room, I think, is involved in it, their own little canteen to be replaced. And we did have a director here, Greg, that I pointed out years ago now, that we painted 3/4 over the asbestos signs, and I see it hasn't changed. We still, and I was hoping to get my photos of it today, but it didn't work. So I'm concerned there to make sure that any work we've done there, even though the asbestos signs painted over, that there is asbestos in the building. Apart from that, if we vote for it, good luck to them, and hopefully somewhere along we can sort out that we've now given away, or will give away, part of our grass. I think every bit of grass we have is important, and so we're giving away that much right along Wilcat and on the other side, but I still support it.
Well, thank you, Councillor Barnett.
Yes.
In the whole West End.
Yes, I think there are quite a few things here that we have to be quite careful with in the actual, if it is successful. I mean, it is a great opportunity, and if you think in terms of lifetime, that probably won't be looking at this another 30 years time for probably all our three major clubs. But with the, again, removal of healthy trees is always a concern. I'm hoping that we will be able to, through perhaps some report back to council, establish more trees to make up for the loss, because I'm sure that'll be quite in our community. That's probably quite concerned about that. I think that there needs to be discussion and proper measurements with the RSL to sort out flagpoles, because I mean the flagpoles are conveniently in that position, but it may be that along if we plant some more sort of formal trees, like there, and the flagpoles can be moved away on the sides more. So I think there's and also that when any construction happens, there'll have to be very serious consideration given to protecting the memorial, the main big one, and hopefully the government. So, yeah, and I'm not sure if I think if we have through the lease that we can't force the club to release, say that you must have access to some public access. But I'm sure if we discuss that further with them on that, later down the track, might happen something. Bit more, some access, public. You know, I mean, you have to be booking ways to book things through like Space Code or things so it can be managed. Yeah, I know it's a concern when the sporting club do have others that aren't, you know, members, or maybe they can have another form of membership that is suitable. Anyway, that's all, not so much for this recommendation. And the last thing is, I looked for about, it would be good if we could somehow get our sporting clubs and that to have a list of all their, say, works or requirements into council, so that we can get more of a handle on these sorts of things. So, yeah, so I'm supportive of this down. If we don't support it tonight, I don't know if that can actually put in for it. That's important.
Yeah, Councillor.
Obviously, we need to deal with this matter tonight in terms of applying for the grant, I believe, with the lab. Would there be scope though, if the grant is successful, for the design and the plan to change? Because I know that with the Broadview one that we submitted, I think we could potentially be making some changes to the way the building's designed. I think the minister was, from my memory, okay with that. Does the same sort of rules apply here? Will we have scope to actually change it? Is this just being presented to us tonight to get it on the ground for the grant submission?
So, yeah.
Through the chair, I think it'll be some months before we hear back about the grant application. It has been lodged. It was lodged the day after we had the workshop. So I think that it'll be some months before we hear back. Yes, I have known several occasions where a successful grant is able to be amended, but you need to stay true to the core intent of what the grant was lodged for. So I think, you know, if you were to better the community and sporting or recreation outcomes through your amendment, I don't think there would be an issue with that. If you were to pare back and not have as good an outcome, I think then you would run into trouble in terms of the grant criteria. So I think there is still opportunity to fine tune, definitely, as long as we don't lose that core intent of what the grant application was seeking.
I'd like to potentially, if possible, move an amendment or test the floor with it. Look, I've obviously created the wording here, so happy to have feedback on the wording. I'd like to move a point 4, and I'm glad to know that there is scope to change it. So, as part of the Prospect Tennis Club upgrade plans, so let's start. So, as part of the Prospect Tennis Club court upgrade plans, the City of Prospect work with the Prospect Tennis Club to make one court accessible to the public for community usage. Sorry, the screen's actually quite. Yes. I'm happy to speak to it.
Can I just before you speak to it, can I just understand I'm not sure how the CEO will interpret the motion. Can you be really clear? Is it our funding is subject to, or this is an optional?
Subject to.
Our funding is subject to. So is it just, I'm asking a big question.
Yes.
Is the funding from council subject to public access, or are you asking staff to work hard to see if it's possible?
So we're working with them.
So I'll stick to that intent and just go working with to try. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. It's your opinion.
I'll stick with it. So.
Yep. Okay. You have the floor.
Okay, reason I'm moving this amendment, you know, I have received feedback from one resident that is happy to offer for us to actually pursue this, but they want to see, particularly, and it's around the Broadview Football Club precinct. Obviously, we've provided funding at that precinct, and we're going with the community hub model where we expect that the football club is a tenant of the facility, but we expect community use and we expect wider community I guess, patronage and outcomes as a result of that. So they were saying, well, if on one hand we've got to be a community sort of hub model where we're providing access, facilitating a lot of access to the public, then why should the public be able to access the Prospect Tennis Court Club upgrade? I guess the tennis courts, if we're going to be spending potentially $900,000 ratepayers' money on this, obviously subject to 50-50 match grant funding. But if the grant funding doesn't come through, the issue for the Prospect Tennis Club is still going to be there, that they're going to need these courts upgrades. So we're going to be looking at potentially a $900,000 exercise regardless. So I think if we're going to be looking at this sort of level of money that we're investing, I guess this member of the public is saying, well, where is the wider public benefit if they can't access the courts? Yes, it benefits a few hundred people of the club, and obviously I want to see the club be successful in this endeavours. But I also know with sport and rec grants, they're really competitive, and they're looking for club upgrades or facilities, but they're looking for how will this benefit the wider community? If it's only benefiting, say, 300 club members, and there's no ability for wider public access, you're going to be competing in grant applications for projects that will have much bigger usage opportunities. So for me, I took on board that feedback, and obviously I've aired that at the recent workshop, but I do want to see that we try, and I'll make it try to, just to get our intent there. But I do want to see at least us work with this, and if this is subject that we can amend the plans, that's only going to be a benefit to the grant application to try and get at least one court accessible to the public, because you can show in the grant application or future, if you make an amendment to it, this is actually going to have wider benefit and could impact hundreds of people in our community being able to access court to play. And if we are on one hand with grant submissions expecting the Broadview Oval with that precinct for I guess us to support that, to have the community to be able to access that, which I support too. I think it's a great initiative we've gone with. I sort of, one hand, think, okay, well, if this is going to be a $900,000 exercise where council could end up in the long term having to fund a $900,000 exercise, I would too want to see how this is going to benefit the wider public as well. So this is why I'm moving it. I know I'm going to move it to test it before, but I would encourage us to support this amendment and to try and work with the club. And it might mean that the court upgrade plans need to be amended here, and so that way, if you're putting a fence in or however that works, yes, I think the club was saying the other night, if you go to put a fence in the middle of the court, you're going to have a very sort of, it's going to be difficult for, I guess, to move and adjust if you're playing. But obviously these upgrade plans we've done for the submission, we have the scope to improve them. I think, yeah, this will only enhance it. So I seek your support.
Thank you. Spoken strongly about running an amendment. Are you okay for us to move for a second?
Oh, you need to. I was speaking to, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Council Group, you happy to incorporate?
I can't provide any explanation to my answer apart from yes or no, which I realise, but I will must something up.
Would you want to put the word lottery in there somewhere at all as well?
No, why would I do that?
No reason at all.
I'm just one of 7 voices.
But it's a no.
Voices.
Again, it's a no. Do I have a, you okay? Do I go for a seconder now? Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Backer, wish to speak to.
Sorry, you've asked the second. If he says no, then that's enough. Yeah.
Correct, yeah. Yep. I'm sorry, you're totally irrelevant in this equation. I'm sorry to reinforce that because you asked me.
It's a lottery, isn't it?
Yes, life's a lottery, yeah, it is. Councillor Backer is seconded, you wish to speak to it.
Yes, I do, and I thank Councillor for putting forward the motion, and I'm glad I'm going on the record so I support community use. So I would certainly be uncomfortable with some of the things that said last week, because certainly this is a community, this gives some community benefit, and not like a lot of sporting clubs, there are businesses associated with it, because that's how you pay the coaches and those kind of things. I also just wanted to clarify. I was sort of googling to see what schools and things. Is Blackfriars is one of the schools that maybe through the chair to use the courts, or Nailsworth School? Or?
Right, CEO, are there any schools that use the courts?
We did mention the workshop
Through the
4 or 5
chair.
schools.
Yeah.
I was going to see how that's right.
Yeah, they are.
Through the chair, last week when we did hear from the tennis club, they did say that schools were using it. They did name 3 or 4 schools. I
Yeah,
thought they were
absolutely.
only public schools. I wasn't sure whether they actually
Rosebery
named
Prospect and
private.
Rosebery Prospect and
Yes.
See, you're eliciting answers
Yeah,
from
no.
multiple sources, CEO. I'm very grateful to you. So thank you, councillor.
Yeah, so I'm just Googling just to make, sure who the benefits for. So obviously with the kids in the community, that's great. But, the fact that it's in the master plan, I'm supportive of it happening. I think that's great. I think in the master plan, it did envisage having a court accessible to the public. And I think we've got to be really careful we're not creating little country clubs. You want to make things accessible. I drive past, some people cycle past, but when you go down Prospect Road in the parklands, and they've just done the tennis courts there, which are tennis/basketball courts, and they're used all the time. Going on. It is a residential area, so I can understand how there are that have controls, and that's where I guess public access versus club. Fellow deputy mayor Lara can attest to some of the challenges around those shared spaces. But look, I think in this climate, when residents saying to me, it's not just residents, it's also state taxpayers as well, because it's part state funding as well. How is it benefiting the wider community? And I just don't think the application went far enough to demonstrate that. It also didn't do a landscaping plan and give us an elevation of how they're going to respectfully do the area next to the RSL monument, and didn't consider the flagpoles in the whole equation. And I think probably one of the an outcome from this could be like we might give you the grant, but we might not give you as much. Is that, or is it like all or nothing?
For the question,
Maybe a question through the chair.
CEO.
So through the chair, if I understand the question you're asking, is it all?
So for example, for the grant, we ask for X amount, or they give you the full amount, or they can do up to that full amount.
The government.
The government.
Well, my understanding is that you ask for a grant for a certain amount, and that's what you get.
Yeah.
Because
So
if they give you less,
yeah.
we're going to do 6 sports instead of 8.
Yeah.
So
Well, my thing would certainly, we had discussed the 7th court, which would certainly alleviate some of those issues by pulling it back. And I think one, especially because we're pushed for money, we're at $25,000 short for 7 ample courts that avoids and respects the RSL memorials would be a better outcome. But that's micromanaging. I think one of the courts should be accessible.
okay, thank you.
Just point of order. Can I just check? Councillor Rippin's amendment said try to. That's not appearing on the screen. Can I just clarify? That's kind of a really important bit.
No, I've asked the question, whether the words imply and therefore should say subject to, or do they imply try to? He's clarified the words as they are for what he wants, which is interpreted as try to, not subject to. That's why I asked him.
I'm sure history will show that, but fair enough.
Well, it doesn't say subject to, it says work with. That's the amenders' words.
Okay, I just want to check because I just had to try to. So.
Yeah. Well, yes, but in interpretation, not in changing the words. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Your point of order is overruled. Whatever section of the act you're referring to. Would have chosen a number like a lottery. Further debate, Councillor Pearce.
Just want to ask a question. What's the situation with other courts at Broadview, Collingrove and Broadview, regarding public access? What's their situation?
Question. CEO.
Through the chair, I might have to throw that one to the director.
Director.
Through the mayor, both the Collingrove and main Broadview courts do not have public access, but there are 2 courts that have public access on the western corner to the same courts that do have full public access in that locality. Broadview Tennis Club also uses them at times, but I think they use them on an informal basis.
Thank you.
But they do have full.
Yeah, thank you. Any further,
This is going against the vein of those 2 clubs. In effect. But anyway, my concern is one that Councillor Brigg brought up, is the shortfall of 25,000 in the business plan. And in the report, it does mention that they have a very good chance of perhaps getting the grant, but it does mention the grant could be for a lesser amount. So taking that, if the grant's only for 300,000 and we're putting out 425 of it, the scope of works would have to change, I imagine. It talks there in point 2 saying that if we're endorsing this, that the construction is pending the confirmation of grant funding or other external funding being provided. I don't know where that external funding would come from. So I'm uneasy with it to a degree. For instance, the community centre of Broadview, our money in that business plan was pending their successful grant application, which they got, and sort of marrying that 50-50. In this case, we're already 25,000 under. Where do we go if the grant is lesser from the government? For instance, 300, we've got 700,000. We're not going to get, in attachment 1, they talk about the 8 courts, the poles and the netting and all that sort of stuff. So
Perhaps if I could, not from your perspective, not usefully interject, but just remind you that we're debating the amendment at this point.
Oh,
I'll restrict your discussion to the amendment.
yeah, okay. No, I just want to, sorry. So I'm not in agreement with the amendment. But I want those points thought about.
Thank you. Sorry to do that to you.
That's okay.
Yeah. Any further debate on the amendment? Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Barnett.
I don't mind the sentiment, but I'm not going to support the amendment. There's all sorts of problems with it, which the club raised with us last week. A brand new surface can be ruined very easily, and the club would be the ones who are left footing the bill to repair it. I think that's the difference with the ones in North Adelaide. The council owned, if they're destroyed or damaged or vandalised, then the council's going to pick up. Their council's going to pick up the tab, not the club. So I think that's a little bit of a difference there. I think in essence, all the courts are available and accessible to the public through a booking system that they plan to implement. They made that point clear, that there'd be a small cost involved in administering that. And the club is a volunteer organisation. I don't think they pay or employ anyone. So any work done to manage that whole situation needs to be done by volunteers, which are short in their availability as it is anyway. They also made it clear that fencing it off wasn't an option because that would mean needing to push it out even further toward the east to allow enough room runoff either side of the courts. There's the community club at Broadview Football Club would be, I assume, rentable space. It wouldn't just be a free-for-all. Anyone could walk in with that. There would be doors, I assume, on the club rooms there, so people can't just walk in and say, well, I feel like sitting down and playing cards in here today, or whatever it might be. So I think we just need to look at this situation in its own, not necessarily try to find the parallels throughout all the different locations and spaces in our city. As it stands, again, without saying it would have been better if this came to us 3 months ago, we might have been able to resolve this then. As it stands now, I think we're past the point of necessarily being able to write with any more specificity into the application. Ultimately, all the courts are available through a booking system, so I think we've still achieved that purpose without needing to amend the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I mean, I think it's saying to work with, so it's not making things mandatory or dependent upon whatever. And it was, we did talk about it at quite some length when we had the workshop with the tennis club and before us. I was a bit surprised. One comment was, something you can pay $200 membership. Speculate. I mean, yeah, I do. I think there are lots of different ways that clubs can make themselves a bit more accessible, and I think that it's just a matter of having a discussion about it. I think the main point for me is whether it should actually be now. I would prefer it to have come as a motion on notice, separate to this. That's my only concern, really. But So I guess if you don't try, you don't get, do you? Or that. So I'm not probably supporting this.
Thank you. I'll just speak briefly from the chair because I'm quite troubled by the amendment, not because I don't think it's good intent. I'm troubled because of a number of things. I'll just kind of run through them. It is true, I think if they'd come early, we could have had a more strategic discussion. I'll grant that, and I'm not sure why they didn't come to us earlier, why we didn't pick it up and bring it to us, but either way, that's where we're at. So that's a bit unfortunate. The club has 8 courts. They put in a grant to upgrade 8 courts. At the end of it, they want 8 courts. They've told us that they're already oversubscribed and they need all 8 courts. I have to take them at their word for that. So I'm not sure that 7 would be okay. It's their club. When we talk about strategy, there is a mob who's done a really good strategic plan in this precinct, and that's us. We have a really good strategic plan for this entire precinct. And we as a council have endorsed that, previous councils in terms of membership, but as an entity, this body has endorsed a strategic plan. It's really, really clear. It's really crystal clear. It says, if you want a public access court, it'll be a 9th court. So this club has come to us saying, we can see your strategic plan, we can see our 8 courts, and your 9th court. Our 8 courts need upgrading. We want your help to upgrade our 8 courts. If you want to build your 9th court, well, fine, but you haven't said that. We're here to look after what our club needs. So the first thing that troubles me is if we want people to follow a strategic plan, I think they are. If we want to do something different, I'm not quite comfortable that we impose it. That's why I asked that question about whether it's subject to or not. If you drill down into the detail, that's where it gets a little trickier. So if we get this arrangement so that the public can access it, who pays for the lighting? Who pays for the net when it's torn? Who pays for the lines? Who pays for damage by kids with bikes who want to go on there because it's nice and flat and safe? Who pays for the damage to the fence because people take a soccer ball in? And this is what people will do with public court, and they should. We've got a fantastic one at Broadview Oval. It's a multi-purpose court, and it's really, really popular. But it gets a hammering compared to a tennis court surface. It actually has a different surface. The St Philip's courts are full public access, and Broadview don't rely upon them. They use them. They don't control the surface or the net costs or the lighting costs. We do. If we had a 9th court, I'd be wildly in favour because we would control all the costs and the damage, all the controls, all the booking if we wanted to. So I think it's not quite sitting comfortably with me in that sense. In terms of public access, they have said they've got a $120 annual fee to access the courts as a casual member rather than a full club member. It might be that they could be convinced to have a casual access fee rather than an annual fee, but nothing's free. You know, if you want to go and rent a proper tennis court, you've got to pay money. You're going to go to a public court, that's fine, go to a public court, but put up with the lesser quality you get at a public court. And the parklands are full of them, because that's how the City Council's approach. That's fine. But if you're a serious tennis player, you won't go there for a serious match, you'll go there for a casual match. And that's okay, I understand that. If that's what we want, I'd be happy to talk about the 9th court. Further difficulty arises because they want to widen the runoff space between the courts to meet at least 2 of the 3 standards. That requires the fence to move to the east, which is already causing compromises. And I think as Councillor Harris has said, bang up hard against the back of the monuments at best. If you put a fence between courts 7 and 8, which is the implication of the amendment, the runoff area for court 7 needs to be increased, and the runoff area inside the western side of court 8 needs to be increased. So what was the gap between the courts at 3.5 metres can't be. It has to be 6 metres because you need 3 metres either side to meet the second of the 3 standards they spoke about. It's 3.5 metres run up on the side if you meet the international standard, which means the fence on the east has to move another 2.5 metres or so, which means all the memorials have to move if the 8th court is to be fenced, if 1 court is to be public. So I'm kind of struggling to work out how this could take effect without them quite fairly coming back to us saying, what about your plan for your 9th court? Where's that at? And we'll have to move the fence, so the memorials have to move, and who's going to pay for that? And we haven't done a design about any of that, so we don't understand how to make this work. So that's why I'm kind of thinking, I like the intent, I get the intent, but we've got a strategy, number 1. Number 2, I can't see how this can be given effect if it has a fence, On top of that, there's costs the club will incur, which really are public costs if we want to have a public court, and this doesn't help with that. Having said all that, I wanted to speak to the whole thing, saying I really encourage staff to come back to us with options. But what will it cost to shift the memorials, to give them international court width? Because we don't have that court width available anywhere else in the city. Broadview can't do it. Collinswood can't do it. To turn the old Broadview Croquet Club into 4 courts, which I think we can, they're at a squeeze. They're not at the full desired width. So they're not going to be able to do it. This could be a unique opportunity. I don't understand what that means. 9th Court, don't know what that means. Someone said there's a colossal gum tree there. What impact will they have on a 9th Court? I don't understand what that means. So I'd like the staff to do a lot more work around that and come back to us whilst we're waiting on the grant outcome, because there might be, as Councillor Groot, the mover, quite rightly said, it's 9/10 of a really good answer here. Why wouldn't we make it 10/10 and do it properly? As Councillor Barnett said, you do this stuff once every 25 years. That's kind of where I'm sitting. Within that discussion, I think we could probably get a good answer to the public court. But I'm probably less comfortable in saying it's part of this solution as it's before us tonight. Yeah, that's probably where I'm at. Sorry. Now, having recognised that I've spoken to the amendment, are there any further speakers to the amendment? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I start off thinking I'm going to support the amendment, I swap, and then I come back. To me, the amendment doesn't say you have to have that 8th court to people. You can talk about it. So talking about it, you've raised that 120 they want people to use casually, but an outcome could come that, all right, we won't have a court, and the lady that was the trainer or coach, whatever, that sort of thing, she talked about a possibility when she's there of maybe opening the courts for people to have a bit of the, when we talked about the other 2, St Philip's, the open courts, you also got Nunuwira, which has got open courts and that anyone can use. On the Broadview Tennis Club, you've got one whole lot there that are sealed off that they use. The other ones they use, and I talk about Broadview, not Collingwood, they got the other 2 courts that young people do come and play on because they can actually go in there. If no one's on there, they don't like it, but young people go on there. So I see that possibly, now I am going to support it, possibly it just gives that open discussion to talk. But I do want to say to the mover and seconder, if you do look at Nunuwira's one in Mawson Street and that, you'll find that once the courts are open, then you've got those young lads that play that game, and I don't even know what it's called, like a little net down the bottom. They run up on the wire on the side, and we replace that quite often, and there's a lot of damage done. So having an open court situation sometimes can be a thing. But I like to still see it in there, and if it gets nowhere, it opens a discussion with them. That maybe why they're doing the coaching, why they're not playing, serious games sort of stuff. They can have a sign there, open for young people or something, 9 to 3 Saturday morning, something, 9 to 3, some sort of time. So it does give that, just that bit of an avenue to maybe talk something else with them. Otherwise, I'm going to support it.
Thank you. Any further speakers in the amendment? Councillor Groot.
Look, just very briefly, a couple of things for me. I think the intent is absolutely spot on. I think it's right that we need to do that, and I might say this later on as well. We probably need to look at a policy position on public. On funding public projects that don't have public access. That's outside of this conversation tonight, but that's something else that maybe will come back to us at another time of workshop. Just talk about what are our parameters that we might want to think about. I think that's a better place to have this debate. To the point that the club said, if there are people there, they're open to people coming along. I agree. I think I understand what the intent is of the motion, but the intent and what it says, in my mind, are 2 different things. It doesn't say try to, it says to make one court accessible to the public. So if I'm reading this in 5 years' time, I will read that as the intent was on the council at the time to make one court accessible to the public. I don't think we can do that now. I think that the grants in it's probably material to the grant application in terms of numbers and the way it's developed. So I can't support on that basis, but I absolutely support the intent. I thank Councillor Britt for it. I think that debate though around the intent belongs somewhere else rather than here tonight.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the amendment? No, there's no summing up on the amendment. Now put it to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against the amendment? The amendment is carried. Okay, now return to, and it becomes part of the motion. Any further debate on the motion now? Its fourth part. If not, return to the mover, Councillor Britt, who should sum up.
Look, just to say, this is an exciting proposal. Really keen to look at what this can do for the city of Prospect, and particularly for that area, and going back to the intent of what is happening here and our master plan and the use of public access courts. I would just encourage people to think about that as they vote for this. To Councillor Harris's point about the trees and the flagpoles, I think it's a really, really good point. I also went and had a look in my morning walk there to think about if I was there on a rainy April morning for an Anzac Day service, and I was trying to put the flags at the poles, I'm going to have my back to a mesh and to a wire fence. And I think we need to look at that. I think that's part of that broader conversation about what do we do with the memorials. And I would love to entertain a conversation about how do we make that different and provide that extra space, the extra court. The only other thing I'd ask is if it's possible to take in parts, because I don't support part 4. We may not support it for part 4.
Can we take in parts? That concludes debate. All those in favour of part 1? Against? It's unanimous. All those in favour of part 2? Against? It's unanimous. All those in favour of part 3? Sorry, I'll do it all at once. Thank you. Against? Supported unanimously. All those in favour of part 4? All carried. All right, thank you. Item 10.3, periodic review of finance corporate policies, August 2021. Expect a lot of debate here. Someone wish to move it, get it on the floor. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to it?
I'd like to move to get it on the floor. I'm interested in what my colleagues around the table have to say and look forward to summing up.
Yeah, respectful. Do I have a second? Sorry. Councillor Green, thank you. You wish to speak to it?
Look, just to say, the policy around loans to third parties, I think, is actually really important. I know that there's no material change to that; it's just a format change. But I think we should just be cognizant of that particular policy. It's important to us as a council. We have some of those at the moment in a form with different sporting clubs. So I think that is just an important policy for us to be aware of. If you haven't read it, to read it. And what the Deputy Mayor said.
Any further debate? No, I'll just point out in debating that there were some minor changes to loans for third parties policy, but they were changes to reflect what current practice actually is. There were some statements in the previous policy that we already had not complied with that didn't need to be in there, so they've been struck out. A couple of minor changes.
Sorry, just point of order. It says here no amendments have been made to the loans to third parties policy beyond transferring it to the new document format.
Just ask the CEO to clarify that. So the audit committee requested changes. I thought they were made in the context of the minutes of the meeting.
Through the chair, there was some requested amendments to the policy by the audit committee. My understanding was that the policy has been updated in accordance with the audit committee's instructions, so that report statement is incorrect.
Right.
Good point of order, though. Upheld.
Thank you.
Life's not a lottery.
It's
Only
not
black and white.
1 in 7 chances of getting it
What are the
right.
chances?
Not 1 in 9.
No, 1 in 7. Read the front page.
Anything further, Councillor Griffin? No, I was speaking.
No,
to
no,
yeah. I don't have anything further either. Any further debate on this item?
Not a
Councillor
debate, it's just a minor matter with regard to credit cards, the page 123. It just mentions the director of business has a credit card for $5,000. So it's very long, every director of business. Should that be the manager of business or deleted altogether?
CEO. It's been revoked, is it? Which is in the
7.11.3.
yeah, that's in the policy that we're being asked to revoke.
Oh,
It's in the old policy. Yeah, I was confused first time I read all through that as well. Yeah, so from page 113 to the end of this item, that is the policy that in part 4, staff are asking us to revoke. If you look at the front of the report, which is where all the new ones are by hot links, if you want to have a look at that. Okay, so just to round that out, CEO, has that already been changed by the other credit card policy in other places?
So we are currently, through the chair, we are currently reviewing the credit card policy. That's intended to come to the next meeting of council and certainly the next audit committee as well. So those changes that have been practically implemented within the administration will be reflected in the credit card policy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Pitts?
No.
Okay, any further debate? Deputy Mayor, just to sum up.
No, thanks.
That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.4, new key financial indicator interest ratio. Someone wish to move it in its current form? Councillor Rick, wish to speak to it? Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, wish to speak to it?
Good work, team.
Any further debate? Being none, Councillor Rick, just to sum up. I think it was a repeat, not a summing up technically, but I'll let it go.
But it's not new information.
I don't be a pen or anything. But that concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.5, elected member recognition of service by council. I'd be happy to move it in its current form. Councillor Pearce, wish to speak to it?
Just quickly, I want to thank the manager of governance and the CEO for the prompt reply to the motion. I think it captures the intent of the motion, and I recommend we approve it.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Harris, wish to speak to it?
Yes, but I believe there's one bit missing on where it talks about a little trophy and paperwork and all that. That's good, but now you're going to test my mind here of this policy, but it's been custom for the beginning of time that once you reach 10 years, hasn't been practiced this year, but once you reach 10 years, whether you're on council or not on council, you had the ticket for you and a partner to come to the North Adelaide Football Club.
Perpetuity.
And we didn't do that this year, but such is life, maybe because of other reasons.
Yes.
And COVID. But I would like to see that put in there, because to my knowledge, there's only 2 people that aren't in the room, but Matthew Mitchell and Alan's wife, Norma Gregg, sorry. It's the only way I could remember. I apologise for that. Norma Gregg, they're the only 2 that I think still fit into it, but the councillor that's not here at the moment, that's sitting next to me, he pointed out he's got 10 years up, and then there's yourself, and then there's Christina, and then people that come along. So I'd like to see either recognition or added in, so I'm not sure if we can add it at that stage, but that's also continued after the 10 years.
Thank you. Can I just ask the CEO that is something we've done for a very long time. What would be the easiest way of including that in the recommendation? Because part 2 runs the risk of us adopting a framework that is not included.
Through the chair, if we can, we'd leave the meeting to potentially amend recommendation 2 at the end of that to recognise the ongoing implementation of a
10 years plus.
gold ticket to North Adelaide.
Oh, two tickets per home game.
2 tickets per home game.
To the.
I'd like the golf one.
Yeah. Thanks. Let's just come back from that.
So if I can seek like
Yeah, two tickets to home game.
Yes, you just work some words up, and I'll go for the lead. Thanks, Councillor Harris. That's quite right. Sorry, hang on. Councillor Harris, have you finished speaking other than that item?
That's all I was going to say, apart from that, to support it.
Yep.
And I think it's very good because the people, the colleagues, my comrades that are sitting around the table here and previous ones and hopefully ones to come, that quite often we get an allowance and then people think you're only here for the move and move on. But I believe there's been many people before us and many to come after us that when they come and sit around this table, do their utmost to look after the residents, prospects and the businesses. So they should be recognised for that service.
Thank you. Just before I come to you, Councillor Barnett. Let's have a 10 years service. Might be good just to add the word service. Sorry, Councillor Harris, I think that picks up the intent of what you raised and which has been practiced here for well before my time. So yeah, I just seek leave of the meeting to incorporate that change. All those in favour? Against to discuss incorporated. Thank you for that. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I did have a query on that because I'm just wondering whether this policy supersedes some other old ancient policy. Check whether it's still operational. It talks about a gold pass to the prospect road. And that is a little bit different to what this is saying. So I've got that checked out. And also, I understand that it's through, is it not like that football club or whoever, that they actually allocate councils number of tickets.
Yes.
So it's not to no councils policy to have the tickets unless they're provided to us.
Is that a question that I can answer? Or you, okay. The question is who allocates the tickets? As part of the lease, we require them to allocate 60 tickets to us.
Right.
So it is us imposing it upon them, and then council determines how to distribute those tickets. Councillor Harris is quite right to point out that the 10-year plus service recipients didn't get any tickets this year because the room capacity has been cut to a third because of COVID requirements, and I made a decision to work out community volunteers rewards first, and therefore declined the tickets to others. So that's kind of what's happened. But they are ours to allocate as we see fit.
Yes. And shouldn't it be achieved 10 years continuous? 10 years seems, it's like 2 terms and half.
Is that a question?
Yes.
The issue of continuous service, I think, is answered by the LGA. In fact, that they don't have a ruling on that. And in fact, I recognise that both yourself and Councillor Harris have had interrupted service, and you've been on council a long time, and I wouldn't want to deny you the chance to be recognised for the service that you've had, despite the fact that there was a break. I think we just follow the LGA practice is what I would recommend. CEO, do you have a view other than that in terms of interrupted service?
I think have a consistent sector-wide approach, and I agree. The LGA has never recognised. They recognise service. They don't recognise continuous service.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Barnett.
Question, except for the gold pass question.
Can I turn that into a question? Because
Yes.
you didn't quite, but can I ask you to, can you just
Yes.
rephrase that? What is your question regarding?
My question is, I know that it was certainly some long-term serving council members, and it was called a gold pass. So I don't know if that refers to the tickets, but after you served a certain length of time, you were awarded a gold pass, which entitles you to go to any matches.
Okay, first thing, staff, did you come across any old policy in this regard? Pretty confident that we don't have anything formalised in this sense. So this would be it. Okay. And secondly, we've added the football club entry tickets to the part 2. Does that answer that section of that?
Yes, I just didn't want to, suddenly find that we've got another
another thing somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
Doesn't sound like that from the answer from the staff. They haven't found any other formalised policy. This would be the first.
Right.
Yeah, and in response to questions. Any further debate? Councillor Rick.
I just check in terms of those tickets, is that for ongoing matches indefinitely for North Adelaide, or is it for the way it works? I just wasn't sure. That's just.
My
Ongoing.
my understanding in previous practice, it has been until death and bizarrely in some instances beyond.
We won't mention that. Ben.
Please don't ask me to explain that anymore, but
Right, well,
it's certainly not a restricted period other than your ability to use the ticket.
Make sure that that's good.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Backer, never left it.
I was, okay, I'm just checking, all right, I'll speak to it. So, look, I think it's great that we do have, but, you know, it could appear from the outside to include self-indulgent, right? I mean, one of the things that I find is just councillor honour, you know, it's my reward, and I think you'll find that with people coming through, they might only do for 4 years, or 2 years, or 6 years, or however, you know, people change areas and jobs and have kids and all that kind of stuff as well. So I'm really conscious of coming up to the nominations next year that actually being on the council is a great achievement, even to be youthful. I think that's something we should celebrate, being outgoing councillors after a 4-year period, and certainly it would be good to get feedback on how to make their experience better as far as when we actually bring on new councillors next time around. And for those that are lucky enough to get another 4 years, that's fantastic. So I think having a long service shows dedication to the community. I know it's just not here, it's in our wider networks. So our long serving elected members, it's not just here they are, it's the quiz nights and the openings and citizenship ceremonies. So I acknowledge the good work.
Thank you. Just briefly from the chair, I'd like to reiterate that I don't expect anything more than what I'm already given in the role of being there and dealing with people's helpfully worded suggestions to me late at night that I respond to. Part of the joy of being a mayor, I guess. But there are some important things in this policy which I'm very grateful for the staff pulling together. Firstly, that there is a policy which says these things are appropriate and therefore other things are not appropriate. And I think that's quite important. One of those is the ability for the mayor of the day to provide flowers and a bereavement, which I have been doing, but I'm not protected by policy for doing that. And I know that there's an ombudsman in another place who doesn't reflect kindly upon those sorts of things, which I don't agree with, but would now be enshrined in policy. I think it's quite right and proper. I have no problem in recognising length of service. It's done in many, many other places. It's not a shingle that you can, cash in at cash converters or anywhere else. It's something that people treasure if they want to. And it's anything like my house, those sort of things seem to, well, I don't know, I find them when I'm painting a room in a corner in a box. Any caricatures and mockery of me seems to make its way in the wall. But things about long service and achievements, somehow they fell off the hook. I'm not sure how it happens. But issues like, as Councillor Harris has quite rightly pointed out, the football tickets is a very, very small thing. The invitation to an annual dinner is a small thing, but it's something that we can do. And we do have ways of recognising our Australia Day award winners and our community award winners. And I think it's only right and proper that we do at least something for our elected members who have given many years of service to their city. This is by no means over the top. I didn't ask for it, I don't expect it, but I'm grateful that someone else has prepared it and put it before us as a good way of formalising these things. And as I say, making sure that it's not exceeded because there's boundaries around it. I think it's also working. Any further debate on the side? No, Councillor. Sorry, Pierce.
Yes.
You moved this one.
Yes.
Did you wish to sum up?
Yes. Just quickly to thank again the managed governors and CEO for bringing it back to us so quickly.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against, it is carried unanimously. Thank you. General business of an urgent nature. Is there any urgent business to consider tonight? No. Oh, gosh.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Very briefly, I'll move around to this part of the room, and a great discussion we had at the first thing, and part of a situation we've got in here, we've got 3 flags, we have the Uluru Statement, and when people come up here, occasionally, it's great for them to see, and I think great respect, but I'd love to see it where it was down in amongst the library, down in the front where other people can see it, not just see us tonight and a few odds and ends up here. It was taken down to Nattiquid, but we had, you and I were at the, and Christina was at the art thing on Friday night, and I got asked about it, and it would be good to have the statement downstairs where our normal people come and see.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the CEO if you need a motion to make that happen?
Through the chair, I'm happy to take that on notice and manage that without a resolution.
Councillor, you happy to?
I'm happy to trust the people in this room.
Thank you.
Oh, most. That's the
Just stop there. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other items that are of an urgent nature? Noting that I have to get permission to debate them before we can debate them. Okay, move on. Reports of information. There are only 3. Unfortunately, I need to withdraw item 12.1 for a minor correction. And I wish to speak to item 12.2. Does anybody wish to move item 12.3 on block? Councillor, does anyone wish to withdraw it, I should say? Does anyone wish to withdraw item 12.3? If not, Councillor Rick, happy to move it on block. And seconded by Councillor Harris. No debate on moving things on block. All those in favour? Against? So I do that again. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. So item 12.1, the Mayoral Monthly Activity Report. There is one event that unfortunately was cancelled after the report was written, and that's under section 2, page 184, the meeting with Urban Development Institute of Australia CEO Patriarchi and Stephen Smith, LGA Planning Reform Partner, has been postponed to another week. So if that can be amended to remove that item from the report. Other than that, I'm happy if someone wishes to move it as it is. Councillor Barnett, wish to speak to it?
No, just certainly a lot of important business in there, and the usual source of funds.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Rick, wish to speak to it? Can you just remind it? Sorry, Councillor Rick, wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. All right.
No, just a quick question. I noticed there was a meeting with Enfield in terms of cross-boundary issues. Are you able to advise us which bit of the city we're taking over?
Can I speak candidly? We have a formal arrangement with the Eastern Region Alliance Councils, which has a formal meeting structure, and we get to meet with them. We are surrounded on 3 sides by the city of Port Adelaide Enfield. We don't have a formal structure. So I've made it my practice to, in the absence of a formal structure, and not recommending one to you, because I'm not sure that that is actually a good pathway for us, to adopt an informal structure. So I have deliberately set up no agenda meetings with the Mayor and the CEO, and we come with no agenda, but many things are discussed. In this instance, and that's working very well, they appreciate it as well. And of course, building those relationships is absolutely important, because there's always things that matter to both of us. The issues discussed at that luncheon related to the Prospect Road upgrade that they are undertaking to the north of us. They're incredibly interested in our section. It was the first time Mayor Bowen had actually visited our village heart and spent any time in it, and she was fascinated with some of the things that we've done. That is because her awareness is now heightened, because she's been involved in consultation about the northern section. So we're able to go through a whole pile of tips and tricks about what we've found successful. The business mentoring we've found successful, the network prospect support around businesses, many of the other mechanics around how we've made the village heart quite successful. And it's not just concrete and plants. There are a number of other items discussed which are of less importance, but mostly they revolve around that and other business before the LGA and before GAROC. So just to give you some insight, arising out of it, I don't think there's anything CEO for us to follow up out of it. No, but it is working well in terms of building a strong relationship. And I want to make sure that if they've got a question, they call me or our CEO and vice versa. So I think it's working well from that perspective. Thanks for the question. Councillor De Back.
Yeah, just further to that on, cross-border relationships. Just of note, there is a Mad Monkey rum distillery just off Pin Street in the other county. And I'm just wondering, in that key area there, is that sort of something that we're discussing with other councils? In between Churchill Road and, because I think we've got City of Charleston.
Yes, thank you for narrowing that down. I was wondering if you were asking us if we're discussing Mad Monkeys or
Well, look,
or
it's just like
distilleries.
an informal venue, just say that just so anyone knows there is a rum distillery just over there.
Didn't come up in this conversation. I think, look, we have initiated discussions with your appreciation with Town of Walkerville to revive the northeast road corridor around Collinswood discussion, and also Lower Main North Road. If you've got a mind to it, we could maybe a workshop item, CEO, for us to consider boundary issues. The Ovingham overpass has provided an opportunity for staff to discuss what happens around Ovingham Station. I think they've been dudded in that deal, but anyway, it's not because Charles Sturt did that, but it's their geography suits them getting a better view because their side of the track is flat. We haven't discussed west of the train line with City of Port Adelaide Enfield, but we are in discussion with the new LSA about the long-term future of the industrial zone adjacent to Islington Station, for example, and we could easily justify a specific conversation around that.
It's a good opportunity just to share what we've done, like what we're doing, but because anyway, other elected members can.
Yes, yeah, I will put that down for an item for future workshop. Good suggestion, thank you. Can I just point out from the chair speaking to my own report, that there are a couple of webinars in there which I found incredibly useful. The Stay True to Uluru Treaty webinar and the Reconciliation SA webinars. If you're interested in that topic around Statement of the Heart, around voice, around Makarrata, around treaty, please go and find those webinars. They only go for an hour. They've had excellent speakers within them. And I found it very, very informative for the stuff that we're trying to get our heads around as well. So really worth the effort and get on the circuit. I've been really delighted about what I've learned. Attended treaty meeting place International Day, the World's Indigenous People webinar as well. So Reconciliation Australia are also involved in those. And they're online. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Dunn there as mover.
You just, I don't know whether something like that.
A question.
I had a question. So talking about webinars, so there's 3 ones on tomorrow. One, and it's about climate change and council.
Climate change partnerships.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, I will be attending that and it'll pop up in the next report. But if other people want to get online as well, please get a registration detail from staff. I think so. Yeah. That's something that other members have expressed interest in, so I'm attending for that purpose. Thank you. Any further discussion on the report? If not, Councillor Barnett, wish to sum up?
No.
Please debate. All those in favour? Yes, it's carried unanimously. Thank you. 12.2 Growth Corridor Report 6 monthly update report. I'll withdraw just to speak to it. If somebody wish to move it to get it on the floor. Councillor De Back, if you wish to speak to it.
Probably, yeah, briefly and just well. Look, I found it really informative. I think this is one of the challenges with working with state government policy as a local council, not having necessarily control of that policy. Is that a lot of other land has been released. So in many ways, we're facing a bit of competition. Obviously, developers are looking for yields. On the ground, I'm really interested to see how we as an elected member group, again, can help promote our city and what we can do differently there. I just like to see how we can Prospect is a very desirable place to be. But is there anything we're missing or any kind of product or type of thing we should attract? And that's probably a good discussion. But I find this really informative because it's like we're aspiring to this, but the reality is there are other pockets in Metro Adelaide being released to market. And I guess the next 2-3 years will be really interesting. I guess I would say. Because that's what we're looking at. But it's getting the long-term results. So, you know, what's that going to look like in 50 years? That's the time. And I actually want to have those kind of discussions, hopefully with the evolving leadership at Prospect, and work back from the 50 years instead of just the next 4 years. Thank you for bringing that report.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Barnett, wish to speak?
Yes, I think there is a lot of very useful information in reading the whole thing, and again, you know, it meets some of the answers to questions that we've been having in our urban corridor. What's the additional growth, and the second paragraph. That paying to an additional $210,000 per annum, etc. This is what people do. Kind of local. We've got a density apartments, forecast all sorts of dire outcomes having apartments in our city. But so yeah, I think then I was reading about nationally, there's a lack of one-bedroom apartments in the centre that seems to have just been thinking, oh, it's for international, you know, students. But I think it's something, there are some of these things and trends that we should be perhaps solved. There seems to be a dearth of three-bedroom, 2 or 3-bedroom apartments, but not one. Yeah. So I think the more you read these sorts of things, you know, there are some questions and it's like where we should be. So again, thanks for bringing the report to us.
Thank you. And as I drew it to speak to it, I'm grateful for this report. I think it's the first one that I think hits the nail on the head. I think that Collier's, our consultant, really understand what we're trying to achieve. They speak more straightforwardly about the 1% target. They work out what it's worth, and I know they've worked with staff to be able to do that. I think the information provided is tuned into that objective. I think it's really, really helpful. So firstly, to commend the staff on getting this report out of Collier's to tune in on what we want. Secondly, I pick up on Councillor Backer's point that it is fairly linear. It talks about apartments, I think, in great depth. It doesn't really talk about the other land uses that we want, other than saying some of this rate growth split can be through commercial, but it doesn't really elaborate on what the commercial should be or could be, or most likely won't be because of other market forces. So this encourages staff to keep pushing into that space and help the consultant guide the sort of stuff that we are trying to attract, or the sort of people we're trying to attract to invest here. There's a couple of really interesting facts in here that I thought were, well, they're certainly of interest, whether they're useful to you in your discussions with people about the perils of apartments, which a very few number of people seem to want to impose upon me every now and again. Fortunately, others on Nextdoor question what those people mean, and it's good to see some pushback from within our own community about some of the, I think, quite outrageous statements people make about people who spend $1 million on an apartment being unworthy. I just don't understand that. But anyway, I like the public debate. I just think sometimes it's disrespectful to people who live in apartments. But if you're interested in countering some of the hyperbole around this, on page 197, there's a little table there that points out the average apartments per hectare, and there's 6 councils compared, and Prospect has the lowest number of apartments per hectare. So when it comes to apartments, we've got the lowest density. On the next page, it talks about the average number of levels of new developments, and Prospect features as having the lowest number of developments, lowest number of levels per development. So I think in terms of where we originally wanted this agenda to be, all our thrust with the government about zoning on the corridors, I think we're holding true to what we promised the community. That is, we would have the lowest density, lowest heights of any city that got rezoned, and then we'd restrict it to the corridors and do it in a fairly consistent way. I think we're still true to that. Notwithstanding Councillor Tobacco's comments that there's always room for improvement, and it is always good for us to try and strive to do that. I guess that's a mix between economic development and planning in terms of how we make that work. And I look forward to a review on the introduction of the new planning and design code to see what impact that has on our assessment and our outcomes. And we're probably still a year or two away from understanding the impact, so a bit early at this point. But I do want to point out those couple of things and encourage the staff to keep going with the analysis. In terms of the response side, there's a fair bit of overlay from staff about what is to be read into this report, but I'm probably not clear enough for me about what our strategies will be going forward to capture the market, to segment the market, work out which bits we want and which bits we don't want, in particular in that commercial space. I just want to encourage staff to keep working in that area to say, thanks for all the data, here's how it's going to guide our actions. Here's how it's going to guide the sort of people we'll chase and not chase. Here's how to guide what level of response or approach we'll have, depending on the level of interest for that type of development we want. So just a bit of feedback, I guess, out of that. But I think it's the best one we've had in this area, so thank you. Any further debate on this item? Councillor Back, if you come up with something.
Yeah, look, again, really good report. Probably one thing that I would like to see more than I couldn't see covered is just how apartments maintain their prices over a period of time, and that would just be the ones that were first built to where they are now.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. And remiss me not to point out a very small typo on page 192 regarding the value of homes in Nailsworth, but I don't know who cares. I mean, so it's very important to get it right, but there is actually a little number missing. It's $1 million. Don't worry about it. Minor. Motions on notice. There are nil. Questions with notice. There is 2 questions from Councillor Mark Group, and I'll just make life easy. I think I've adopted the practice of reading out both the question and the answer. The question from notice, with notice, sorry, from Councillor Mark Group asked, with the high number of volunteers giving their time selflessly to the City of Prospect, what parking is made available for them? And the second question was, in terms of volunteer justices of the peace, given their role allows very little flexibility to monitor their car park or move their car after a certain time, are any additional provisions made for them? If not, could there be? Response provided by the administration. Council administration has recently reviewed the existing arrangements for our volunteer group, as no designated volunteer parking is available at Bayindi. In response to the request from justices of the peace and to further recognise the community reliance on the service, it has been agreed to provide exemption parking passes / permits for the justices of the peace, which can be used when parking in 2-hour zones at BND during their volunteer service. So that's the answer that will go into the minutes of the meeting, and that obviously is a change in practice, so thank you for the question. Next item is confidential items. Item 16.1, Acting Chief Executive Officer Extension of Contract. There's a recommendation there to exclude the public. Can I just point out that we've added the the Acting Chief Executive Officer, just for consistency, if we can. Sorry, staff, if you can add the word in the yellow bit, the Acting Chief Executive Officer.